Welcome back to another episode of Buckle Up with Simon and Brian, an ultra running conversation. Simon, you're not home again. Where the heck are you?
We're in Colorado finally. After so much of traveling around, we're back where we want to be for the next 2 weeks, preparing for Leadville, which is coming up very fast. How's your training going, Brian? How are your knees?
My knees are well. My training's going well ish. I say ish because it's not much training. It's kind of like tapering off a little bit, slowing down, maybe not running as far, a little less intensity, a little less volume. But yeah, my knees are fine. They're recovering well. I'm doing all the other things I need to get done, like the yard work. I did a yoga class yesterday. Just things I kind of neglect when I get into these big high mileage weeks of training. So thanks for asking. Thinking of Leadville, Simon, and in our next adventure here coming up in just a couple days, we got a special guest today, Zoe Rom. She is a podcaster through currently through Ultra Sign Up, and also a freelance writer and editor contributor to the running world. I'm sure most of our listeners have seen her and or heard from her. She was just recently on a podcast as well. She was at a trail running convention, and she was talking a lot about sustainability. It goes hand in hand with her book that she has out. That's just about a year old currently. This month it'll be about a year old, and it was a great conversation with Zoe Rum.
Yeah, I didn't know Zoe personally before. Of course, I know her from social media. She's a bundle of joy and energy. You can see that's someone who's very driven in what she does, but also into enabling positive change and having a positive impact on people around her. So it was a great chat about Leadville, but also about her book, about what she sees as important causes for both running, but also for trail in general, I would say.
Yeah, we touched a little bit about sustainability in sport, sustainability in our community with events, and how we can kind of make this planet a little bit better through ultra running. And she has some really great suggestions. We get a little off track of specifically running, but otherwise they all tie back to the core, the root core here, which is long events on the trail that we both enjoy. Without further ado, here's Zoe Rome. Hi, Zoe. Welcome to the show. How are you doing this afternoon?
Excited to be here, Brian and Simon. I'm doing well.
Well, great to see you. I guess I'll start in real quick that we have a little bit of connection in the past. I think we worked together maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe it was longer than that. I think it might have been longer than that. It might have been three
Was
or
it
four.
like
It might have
right
been.
before the pandemic, maybe?
It might have been during
During
or
the pandemic?
through something along those lines. Anyway,
Time is a flat circle.
yeah. Well, we Simon and I always talk about pre and post pandemic. So I think we
Yeah.
were like in the pandemic. So I don't think it fits in a no man's land in there. But so we have a little history of working together. You coached me for a hot minute in a good season. I had a great race that year at Moab. But so we do have some connection. You live in the Roaring Fork Valley as well as myself. And Simon is joining us from Breckenridge, Colorado. He's on his Colorado road trip for the next couple weeks. But I do want to back up a step even farther and kind of get a perspective of how you found yourself in this space.
Yeah.
You have a lot of hats. So
A lot of hats.
Yeah. So Zoe, you're working with Ultra Sign Up and doing some freelance stuff on the side. All in the space, though. All in the space of ultra running, endurance sports. How did you find yourself in this spot?
Yeah. So growing up, I was always, pretty into the outdoors, but more from like my family was very into camping and hiking. I was not a particularly athletic kid. I was like a complete bench warmer on my high school volleyball team and didn't have a lot of success in sport. For a while, I actually went to school in Italy, and there I really started to get into running because you go to school 6 days a week in Italy, but you only go to school for a half day. So I had like a lot of time to sort of explore on feet. So I started jogging around to go look at castles, to go check out forest paths. I lived sort of between Milan and Lake Como. So it was a really beautiful area. And I started just sort of jogging around to look at stuff. And I found that I really liked running, and that kind of stuck. And when I went to college, I got more into it, and I started working at a run specialty store and really fell in love with the running community, and started running some local races. And because the store I worked at sponsored an ultra, I got a free entry to a 50K, and I was like, oh, that sounds really hard. I better try it. And so I ran a 50K and I won it. And I was like, oh, okay, great. Like this might be a thing that I have a lot of fun at and have some potential in. And I really fell in love with trail running and running longer distances. And at the same time, I was also working as a backpacking guide in New Mexico. So I would sort of trail run to stay in shape for guiding.
I want to back up to Italy. Like, did your family move there? How did that even come about?
Yeah.
Like, and what did
So
that look like?
when I was in the my dad had a Fulbright fellowship to go do research in outside of Venice, and I went with him for 6 months, and I really liked it. And I did not love going to high school in Arkansas, so I came back for like 6 months, and then I applied for a study abroad scholarship through Rotary International to do a year of high school in Italy. And that's when I lived in sort of the Milan area and just loved it. Fell in love with the culture, fell in love with sort of getting to see a different part of the world than my little slice of Arkansas, and getting to experience another culture.
Yeah,
What
how
was
old were
cool?
you when
Yeah.
you sorry, how old were you when you did that?
I was 17.
17. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good age for that. Did you pick up Italian? I
Oh
can
yeah,
test you
yeah.
if you want.
I had to go to school in Italy, so I actually the first time I lived in Italy, I homeschooled myself, which meant I taught myself Italian by watching a lot of MTV. So I definitely sort of learned a different version of Italian than what I ended up using in my high school. But I mean, I lived with an Italian family, went to school in Italian, so there was no breaks, which is that's an incredible way to learn a language, is to be forced to use it and to problem
Yeah.
solve and to pick up on those context clues.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, I was lucky because Italian is so close to French that I could improvise a little bit. And
Yeah.
all I heard was that I had a pretty good accent, but I sound pretty stupid. I was like, good enough. You understood what I said.
Yeah.
And I'll be in Italy in September. I'm gonna do a Tour des Géants, so I need to pick
Oh,
that up
cool.
again.
Wow.
Different part a little bit, but
Yeah,
still
different
still up
experience.
north. Yeah, oh yeah, also yeah, for sure. Cool.
Well, that's great, Zoe. I know you have a lot. I know you've had a lot of success in sport since you found it. Maybe not late in life, but later in your teen years, right? I'd say by
Yeah.
no means is it late in life, but yeah. But later in your teen years, you've had some success in running, and that's great. Coming up, we're all three of us will actually be toeing the line this coming weekend here at the Leadville Trail 100, and I believe it's maybe your second time, isn't that?
Yep.
And what does that look like for you? How's your training going? What have you
Training's
done leading up for it?
Yeah. Training's been good. I've been reflecting recently on, I feel like the training block I've had in the past 12, 16 weeks has been great. I raced the Silver Rush 50, and then I've done a couple higher volume weeks between then and now, and I feel healthy. I feel mentally really in a good place. But most importantly, I feel like this year, or that training block, exists in the context of I've just had a few years of really great consistent training. And I think, like sometimes it's easy to get distracted when you see people on Strava doing wild shit and, obsessively scouting the course and, logging like absolutely monster long runs. And I am trying to really focus on the work that I've done over years and years and years, rather than getting too focused on like the immediate training block before, or getting distracted by other people's Strava porn.
Yeah, that's a great point about our like our fitness age, right? And that's a little bit different than our how many years we have
Yeah.
consistent running going on. I think yeah, I could definitely relate to that. I love that context for sure.
It gives me, I feel like, a lot of confidence and just stoke. Like, this race, I've been thinking about it for a while. I've been applying to the lottery for a while, and it's pretty meaningful to me, as any 100 sort of ends up being. But feeling like I get to come, not everyone is so lucky. So there's a lot of gratitude that I feel for being able to toe the line in a really special place with really special people. And it just feels like an amazing sort of like circling. Like you said, it's my second time at the race. I DNF'd my first year right outside of May Queen. And I was pretty unprepared, pretty undertrained. And it's really amazing to reflect on how far I've come in that time, from being a little 24-year-old who just, would do random stuff in the mountains, to someone who has really tried to become a student of the sport, really tried to understand the 100-mile distance, really tried to understand training from an athlete's and a coach's perspective. And it just gives me an immense respect and admiration for this course and this race.
And I'm curious, even though you didn't necessarily scout the course, you probably know it a little bit. Is that your type of racing, or because I think Leadville for me it's a fast course, except like in the middle, but
Yeah.
the rest of it is like it's a running course. You don't need to scout it. You're just gonna have to blast it. So curious if it's your style of running, or how does it fit with your kind of runner experience in general?
Yeah, so I actually did a little boot camp out in June, where it was actually kind of a tough boot camp because it was when Hope Pass was like almost on fire. So Hope Pass was closed, unfortunately. But Power Line was open and ready to go. So I ran Power Line like a bunch of times because it was like the only part of the course that was like kind of worth scouting, and also not under snow. But I also gave myself permission during that boot camp. I was like, you know what? Like, you can't train on Hope Pass. Let's just go have fun. Let's like remember why we're here, which isn't to just obsess about, improving my times on Hope Pass. It's to connect with these mountains and connect with this landscape. So I did some 14ers, and I ran on the Colorado Trail, and I ran through the Aspens, and sort of got back in touch about like what my actual stoke for this event is. And that was really special. And Powerline just continues to be a humbling little piece of trail that I'm sure I'll be continually humbled on again. I do like I feel like the mix of it is really interesting, right? Like, it's a really distinct course. The parts of it that aren't slow are pretty fast. And I like running, but I also do like a little bit of power hiking. I love a break. So I'm curious to sort of see, like, I don't necessarily want to say, like, I'm not sure that I want to put like a label on what my strengths or weaknesses are. I do feel like Leadville would play to my strengths, I guess, if I were to, assess it. Like, I mean, I podiumed at Run Rabbit, or 7th place, like in the money podium, done well at flat hundreds, like at Rio del Lago, got 3rd place. So somewhere in there maybe lies Leadville, but with some really interesting environmental kinks that make it kind of different. And I am excited to see how that goes. I think I think the altitude and the environmental factors make it, like, that's what makes a race, is that it's just the day, right? Like, the day that you have out there. And, the course could 100% be to my strengths, but if I don't show up the day of and execute and play with the cards I'm dealt, then it doesn't matter what my strengths or weaknesses are. And I do like to think of myself as a competitor. So I'm just excited to see how the day unfolds.
That's cool. Your point about not necessarily doing Hope Pass, that's what I always tell people. Some people are nervous, and I say, okay, go do Hope Pass, but don't do anything else.
Yeah.
But really, what you should go do is go do Massive or go do Helper. You're going to do Hope Pass during the race twice anyway, so you don't need to be there twice. Just go have fun. And these 14ers are amazing.
I did do Hope Pass, just like, wanted to put that in my quads. And I love Hope Pass. It's so beautiful. It used to be, when I lived in Aspen, it used to be like the place that I worked at a radio station, so I worked a morning shift and I would be done in the afternoon. I would drive over Independence Pass and just like try to get out of cell phone service as quickly as I could. And that run just sort of was like an escape for me. I
Mm.
really love that pass. I think it's really beautiful. I love that you can see so many 14ers from it. I love that you can see the town of Twin Lakes. I love the White River National Forest, and it's just such a special little patch of land. And I love that it's part of this course where so many people get to sort of cement their names in trail running history.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love.
our longtime listeners, Mark and Leanne, had a Zoe Rom spotting the other a few weeks ago on Hope Pass. They said the Zoe passed us.
Nice. Yeah. It was so cool. I think like that was something I really enjoyed about doing Hope Pass is that there were plenty of other folks out there and everyone was so like we all know why we're out there, right? Like there's not that
Hmm.
many like tourists who just roll into hike Hope Pass for no reason. And getting to, sort of talk with people and meet people on the way up and down and, sort of try to remember their face and name for race day. And hopefully we get to see each other on the pass again and high five each other and encourage each other somewhere out there on the course, which is one of the things I love about an out and back is that you get to cheer for folks and you get to connect with other runners in a different way. And I love like going out to the thing that I love most about scouting courses is building a relationship with the trail and building a relationship with other people who are running the race. When I was training for Western States a few years ago, I went out for Western States training camp and I was running with Tyler Green and I was like, wow, you've done this race a bunch of times. You're pretty good at it. What advice would you have? And he was like, while we're out here training, I would just try to store all the positive memories and connections that you have out here and like plant them in the trail so that you can pick them up later when you come back when shit gets hard. And I feel like I've just been seeding Leadville for years. Like since 2018, I've been seeding that trail with life experience and connections and stories and good days and hard days. And I'm excited to hopefully seed it with one more day.
I love that. I love that analogy of seeding the course. I think I might even try to reach for that. Zoe, I don't know if you know of all the changes to this year's course. Do you have any things that you're going to do different from? Well, obviously besides DNFing, but anything you're going to do different this year for like a crew
Mm-hmm.
standpoint, or any of those things with the
Um,
changes that we have coming up?
So I think I've just gotten a lot more comfortable with my 100-mile strategy. I also have a fueling strategy, that's huge, and a hydration strategy, which is huge. And again, one of the things that's tough about Leadville is the changes in environmental factors. There could be huge temperature swings. So you do have to problem solve and be flexible around like a fueling and hydration plan. It can be really hot, it can be cold and rainy. And you just have to, again, just like play with the cards you're dealt. Last year when I Run Rabbit, the elite field doesn't use pacers. And running through the night by myself was one of just like the most fun experiences I've ever had. And I want to sort of tap into that place of curiosity and exploration again when I mean like I guess running alone in the dark on the Continental Divide is like a little bit scary on the surface, but when you run towards that thing rather than away from it, it becomes like an amazing experience rather than something to be feared. And I think making peace with the things that are going to be hard about the race and acknowledging like this is going to be hard, it's not going to feel that good, and anticipating it without building anxiety around it is sort of what I'm focusing my mental strategy on. I think it's for me it's mostly about really trying to run the runnable sections well and then being smart on Hope Pass and taking care of myself. I think that I'm not going to try to be overly aggressive in that section. I think I want to use that part to set myself up for success, and then I'll pick up a pacer in Twin Lakes and we'll be off to the races.
Yeah, I think that's a great plan. Simon and I both have experience. I think Simon just this past week actually went solo at the AC 100,
Wow.
no crew. And so I think we both have experience running through the evening. And actually, I can appreciate that. I enjoy that as well. Currently, I, I like to invite friends and have pacers, and I will have a pacer. this year at Leadville, but sometimes it's easier on the mind to kind of just be in your own space
Yeah.
And create your own environment. And I had a lot of fun doing that in the past few races that I've done solo.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think it's always more fun to not be solo, but I'm also not competing. So I really don't care, but it's very nice to have someone. But I think I do have probably half of my race solo. It doesn't sound like that because when I do my movie, I try to put Nora up front all the time. She's often there to support, but pacing not always, especially she's been racing a lot this year. So yeah, but it it's a nice way to connect with someone also
Yeah.
when you're in that dark place. And of course, you don't pick a random pacer. Usually, you pick someone close to you, and you'll talk, and they'll be there for you, someone you trust. So you get really close to people, and
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. At the same time, it is badass to say, like I did Coco Donut by myself. Like I did Coco Donut by myself, like 4 nights by myself. And like, I'm so badass here.
Yeah.
Of course, if you would have seen me, I wouldn't sound so badass in the moment, but afterwards, I can claim that I'm a badass.
Yeah.
That's what
And
matters.
last year I crewed and paced my partner TJ at Leadville, and I proposed to him in the last section, like going into town. So there's again seeding the course with lots of really great memories, and that's he was it was a tough part of his race, but I think we turned things around a little bit there.
So did he say yes or?
He did, yes, yeah. Thankfully,
Just
it could
checking.
have been an awkward roll into town otherwise. And I think it does technically still count as consent, even though he was not like all
Yeah,
there,
there's a
you
little bit
know?
of coercion there. I'm not,
Yeah.
yeah.
At the finish line, we got him in a camp chair. We wrapped him in like an emergency blanket. We're trying to get him like some fluids. And someone else on the crew, my friend Jordan, was like, "How you feeling, TJ?" He was like, "That was wild. Zoe just proposed to me." And my friend Jordan was like, "Oh shit, we need a medic." They just thought he was hallucinating.
That's cute.
That's funny. I love that. That's another seed, right? And
Yep.
and our friends have the same. I mentioned it already once, Mark and Leanne, but Mark proposed to Leanne on Hope Pass
Aw.
outside of the event, and they got married just above Turquoise Lake in Leadville, and then they've recently bought property on Twin Lakes.
Oh, so cool.
Above Twin Lakes. So yeah, so they have a lot of seeds as well. And I've been to. I didn't go to their proposal, but I was at their wedding and I've been to their property. Yeah, all great memories. I love that. That's going to be super helpful during the event, and you can reflect back on all those moments. So, will TJ be pacing you this year?
He is. He's taking
payback?
me he's taking me from Twin Lakes to Outbound.
Oh, not even in the section that you proposed?
I know. Well, so I had to be strategic. I have a friend, one of my my most consistent training partner, has like been recovering from an Achilles thing. So 12 miles is like 12 flat miles around Turquoise Lake. She's going to pace me for that section, which is also going to be really, really special. But again, mixing things up. Like I spent a few hours walking around Turquoise Lake with TJ, so we're gonna mix things up and do something different this go around. No proposals, though,
Zoe, that sounds great. We obviously will see you hopefully in the meeting around town that week as we're all embarking on this adventure. It starts Saturday morning at 4 a.m. at 6th and Harrison. We have 30 hours cut off to make it in, and hopefully all three of us are successful. I do wanted to shift gears just a little bit. You mentioned that it's the 1 year or near the 1 year anniversary of Becoming a Sustainable Runner, a guide to running for life, community, and the planet, a paperback book that you wrote with your friend Tina Meir.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Tina and I met on Twitter years ago. I was tweeting that my compost bin was unusually smelly, and she slid into my DMs with some amazing recommendations on how to rein my compost in. And we were just like immediately best friends. And she had sort of been tossing around this book idea, and we had really connected over like we both really want to be more involved in creating positive change in the running world and beyond. So we started putting together a book proposal and shopping it around, and then we wrote a book together, which was an amazing experience. This was during the pandemic too, which I think it was really helpful to have an amazing collaborator and to have a creative project to to work on. And I think at a time too where I was struggling to feel like connected to positive change in the world. It was a tough time for our country. I think a lot of us were sort of struggling with the feeling of like agency and like how do I make the world a better place. And this book felt like a way for me to get my ideas on paper and connect with other runners, particularly people who I wasn't already reaching. I think that runners are a really important group to engage because we're a really diverse recreational group, runners writ large, including trail and road runners. And we would be like, if we treated ourselves like a special interest group, we'd be one of the largest in the nation. We could really sway politics. We could be a really powerful force for good if we worked together. And I also wanted to challenge myself. Like at Trail Runner, I really developed sort of a specific voice and angle, but I was concerned that I maybe wasn't reaching the widest audience possible. So I really wanted to write something that spoke to people who were like, no, you need to convince me that I should get involved in environmental stewardship. Like, prove, like lay out an argument for me, which I appreciate that challenge. And I think it's a really important intellectual practice and an important community practice to make sure that we're continuing to speak to the most vulnerable and the most isolated members of our group. So this book took maybe a year and a half, 2 years to write. It required a lot of research, a lot of interviews, a lot of back and forths with Tina, a lot of late night text messages wondering if we could do it. And we did it. And it has just been an amazing experience. And I've really loved getting to, like I did a little mini book tour, and it's been great to sort of meet people who connected with the book, because it's not all about the environment. There's also a part in it sort of about how to sustain your running and how to run healthier, where Tina and I both got, pretty candid about our pasts in running and issues around like burnout, mental health, disordered eating, red S, and sort of just talked about what our real lives were like and what we might do differently now that we know better. And so many people resonated with that, and so many people also resonated with the desire to affect positive change in the world.
So are these, and sorry, I didn't read the book and I'm not familiar with it. I should pick it up. But so the kind of your big cause that you're pushing, well, pushing is the wrong word, but supporting, pushing.
Yeah, push. I'll push. Yeah.
Advocating for is environment and also sustainability in running. I mean, yeah, I'd be curious to read, because I support both very strongly. I think that's a big message on my channel, especially the second part, because it's very trendy to not promote sustainability in running, to promote overtraining, to promote things that are very unhealthy. And to someone who's not familiar with these things, it sounds like the way to go. But people that have a lot of experience, overtraining, these sorts of things, injuries, we run for fun, most of us. Yeah. It's not fun to be injured. And I think there's a balance that people should try to aim, but it's just not as glamorous to push that messaging, I think.
Like, you're not going to get a ton of Strava kudos for like consistent progress over years and years and years. No one's ever going to be like, yeah, maintaining, great job. There's not that much recognition for the real work that leads to excellence and longevity in this sport. But we all get it, but there is like the people that have been in it long enough, like the real ones know, and we're starting to have more candid conversations about like, hey, like our sport might need to reckon with like what habits and ways of beings we promote and we celebrate.
Yeah, I think there's the what's difficult is that ultra running by nature is extreme to some extent, and will attract a certain type of personality that will go into extreme, which then leads to unsustainable behavior. And what is sustainable for someone can be unsustainable for someone else. So also trying to emulate someone can be difficult, especially if, I'm not a pro runner. If I look at pro runner, what I do is kind of lame, but but for an average runner, it is a lot. And I think putting things in perspective, and your own perspective for me is important. It's about me. That sounds selfish, but it's about me, my limit, and pushing my limits and having my adventure. It might sound little to some other people, but that's what brings me joy, and I think that's totally fine.
And
People
that's
are,
also going to be what helps you progress the most over time, right? Like you
yeah,
could emulate some big guy on Strava's training, but like you're going to get hurt, you're going to burn out, or you're not going to progress as quickly as maybe optimal for your physiology. And I think that, people who are able to just stay in their lane, define their own path and stick to it and not be swayed by whatever other people are doing, those are the people that tend to improve the most over time. And again, is it flashy? No. Is it going to get you on a ton of podcasts? Unlikely, because how many podcasts do people want to listen to where you're just like, train for 8 to 10 years consistently, take care of your mental and physical
yeah.
health. That's the
Don't
whole
forget
podcast.
rest days.
Don't forget rest days. Yeah.
Yeah.
So but I think, again, we are starting to have more of those cultural conversations, and it is tough because we're all driven to extremity, right? Like, I love running 100-mile races. That's even though like everyone I know in Colorado, like we're all doing that like all the time. I think sometimes like it's a weird echo chamber. That's an extreme thing. And I think for me, I always want to be focused on making sure I have it and it doesn't have me.
Yeah, balance is critical. I think, and for sustainability and longevity in sport, and having that balance. Of course, after years, you can add to that repertoire and grow. It doesn't have to be equal parts all the time, but definitely finding a balance in the long term is definitely the way to longevity.
Even comparing the training I'm doing now to what I was doing the first time I ran Leadville, I've almost more than doubled my average weekly volume. It didn't happen overnight, but that is like a huge increase. Like it's sort of one of those things like day in, day out. It doesn't feel that sexy, but when you look back, it's like, damn, cool stuff. We did it.
Yeah, real progress takes time.
Yeah.
But that's real progress.
I want to touch a little bit more about the book and maybe the sustainability of events and how they how we as runners, as ourselves, as Simon and I, other people listening, how can we help the environment and the community become that better steward for these communities that we're inviting ourselves into, maybe overstaying our welcome, maybe growing these towns bigger, 3 times bigger than they actually are during the normal week on race week. I just recently reconnected with you. You were picking up trash at the finish line of the Leadville. Was it Silver Rush
yeah.
or was it the marathon? I didn't know which it was. The weekends were back to back, but I didn't know if it was the marathon or the Silver Rush. But you were picking up during the Silver Rush bike ride because you had ran the day before. But you were walking around with gloves and a green recycle shirt and a trash bag, and I was like, "Hey, there's Zoe!" Right? And so we connected and talked. But it was just odd. I mean, it's not odd, quite honestly, to see you doing that role.
Active recovery.
But you were also like the minority. Like you were one of 2 people doing that. So what can we do as a space and a community to help promote that?
Yeah. So I mean, in the small scale, it was important to me to volunteer for Cloud City Conservation Center, which is the zero waste sort of contractor for the Lifetime event series, and they do an amazing job of making Leadville zero waste. They do a ton of education. I would definitely encourage folks to look them up. If you volunteer with them, you can get like a preference in the lottery. For me, it was important to work with them because they were really educational and foundational for me in my environmental stewardship journey. And again, thinking of seeding the course with positive memories, I have gained so much from the community of Leadville and from the races. It's really important to me to recognize that I probably in a human lifetime can't give back as much as I've gotten. And so to sort of channel that humility and then try to give back where I can, even if it means just picking up trash on the course and educating people about what's compostable and what's not at the finish line. But I think that volunteering, that can be a really important way of giving back. But I think what's even more important is I want us as a community to shift our mindset. I see a lot of focus on what we would call marginal gains, right? Like recycling gel wrappers, not getting, t-shirts at races, not having having cupless races. And those things are important and we should do them, but they really pale in comparison to the very real work that needs to be done. We could abolish all cups forever tomorrow, and it wouldn't be enough to course correct for what's happening with our planet. What we need is sweeping policy change. We need political action, and I don't want people to become distracted by the marginal gains to the detriment of these bigger organizational shifts. So I think the most important thing you can do is to join with your community and become politically active. And I know that's a tough message to hear on a trail running podcast, and people get really nervous when Zoe gets political, but I can't in good faith tell people that, if you just don't use cups and you recycle your t-shirts, that will be good. That is absolutely not enough. And I think that as a community of people who dream big, you guys both run 200-mile races. Like, this community is incredible, and it's full of incredible movers and shakers and people who do things that to most people would seem impossible. Why can't we be an amazing force for change in politics in a big scale? Again, yes, take care of the small stuff. Let's make our races more sustainable. But I think even more importantly, we need to challenge our representatives in Washington, D.C. to enact policy change that is equitable. We need to have sweeping changes in terms of how agriculture functions in the United States. We need to transition to a clean energy economy that's just for workers. And none of those things are going to be achieved purely in the context of running. So my challenge to everyone is to do what you do best, which is get comfortable being uncomfortable and think outside of the box and think bigger than recycling. Think bigger than not getting a t-shirt at the next race. Think bigger than, composting in your kitchen. Definitely do those things, but we can't stop there. And that's good news for a community that's excellent at not stopping.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you kind of associate the size of the running community that is growing. I think the challenge that comes with that is that it's not necessarily homogeneous.
Yes.
And we see people coming from other sports. And I've had pushback saying in one of my short videos saying hey, paper cup are kind of borderline. And someone was pushing back against that. And I was like, well, I'm just describing
they were very
this.
pro paper cup.
They were as long as you don't leave any trash, it doesn't matter. I'm like, well, hold on. There's more to that. And for me, the small gesture like that, you're right, paper straw, these sorts of things, people get over focused on something that, of course, it's almost meaningless. You're not going to save the world by banning plastic straws. No. Anyone who believes that is but it's a movement in the right direction. And as long as you don't do these, I would describe them as token gesture.
Yeah.
As long as you don't do them I'm not using paper cup anymore. Planet is saved, and I can do whatever I want now.
That's the wrong way to me. I am perfect.
That's the wrong way of thinking. But doing these small gestures goes in the overall direction of doing everything that you can towards a bigger goal. And yes, you won't save the world by the paper cup thing, but you do that, and you pick up the trash, and you recycle, and you compost, and all of these small things together go in the right direction, and then you move towards the more political and big change, because none of these things will change everything as long as big industry is polluting. But I'm racing Leadville next weekend. I don't think during the race I can change policies in Washington, but I can refrain from using paper cup. And then it's a mindset and a habit that goes in the right direction. So I think both small and big really matters.
Yes. Yeah. That exactly my point. Both small and big really matter, but I get frustrated when it feels like we stop at the small, or where the small is oftentimes used as a distraction from the big. The whole concept of recycling was invented by the fossil fuel industry to make people feel more okay about using plastic. We shouldn't do that. We should not continue to do that. But I think, speaking to your point of sometimes people will push back. And the thing I love about the running community is that it's not homogenous, that people, there is an amazing diversity of opinion, and not everyone is going to, have a ballot that looks exactly like mine. And that's amazing. but what we do share are a common set of values. And so when I'm talking with someone who maybe doesn't exactly see eye to eye to me on some of the policy propositions, I always want to get curious about what our shared values are. I'm like, yeah, I want to hear more about like what's actually important in your community. Oh, is national security really important to you? Well, let's talk about how that interplays with the environment. You're really interested in raising your family. Amazing. Let's talk about how that value intersects with environment. And what I prioritize in my life isn't going to be everyone else's priority. So I think if you can get to know and understand other folks' values and like
Mm,
what other folks' very valid concerns are, then there's almost always a way to speak to those through the lens of environmental justice.
sure. And we're not homogeneous, but I think there is a bias or a direction overall. And I get surprised myself when I interact with people that will be very vocal against something that seems to be almost a consensus. One, for example, was I was talking about different race I'm doing, and the guy straight up said, I will never do this race because they ask for volunteer time. I was like, why is that an issue? Like, don't you think you should give back to the community a little bit? It's like, no, like they make money. Like, I'm not gonna give my time. I was like, oh, okay, like nice, nice meeting you, dude. It's so off because most people in the running community, or at least trail running community, will say, well, I receive so much from other people that I want to find ways to give back, which could be volunteering time, but there's other means that you can do that. It's
Yeah.
cheering people, it's supporting people, crewing, pacing, helping whatever way you can. And I think that's a general tendency that is we're prone to action rather than inaction. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
a common trend with a lot of trail runner and runner in general. Like, we're not typically not couch potatoes.
Yes.
We want to enable change, which the change could be different. And that's what you speak to in my mind of different value sets. I think almost everyone wants to change the world for a better place. It's just our
Yeah.
definition of better place is not necessarily the same. And then it's
Yeah.
finding values there and finding people or a group of people that are prone to doing things rather than just sitting by and just being inert.
Yeah, exactly. I think it starts with a curiosity about what our common ground is and then starting there.
Before I go to Washington D.C., I want to see if we can get the recyclable cups. Can we just make them a little bit bigger?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
like it's just why are they the tiniest little things to drink out of?
I know. Or
Um,
like I have so many reusable cups now and like I
so-
never reuse them and now I feel responsible for them because I get them at like every race and it's a lot. So I think again like we're all learning, as we go, and I think that there is a genuine desire to care for our planet and to care for people in the trail running and in the running community in general. So that's what I feel really, really buoyed by.
Zoe, we're doing this low level stuff, and you're asking us to go to Washington D.C. Is there some middle ground in there that maybe is the next
Yeah,
steps besides recycling cups that you can maybe
vote.
share? Maybe it's in your book or something
Yeah,
along those lines.
yeah, vote. That's the most important thing you can do. Anyone that tells you differently is trying to sell you some greenwashed bullshit. Just vote.
Vote. Okay, that's the answer.
It's very easy in Colorado, at least.
It is fairly easy in Colorado.
And we have a pretty big election coming up. So, yeah, educate yourself, stay engaged, volunteer, learn about particularly local and state candidates. I think a lot of times national politics gets most of the attention, but there are some really important local races, and that's oftentimes where we can be the most efficacious. So, educate yourself on down to the school board, down to your county commissioners, down to your state reps. Those are really important races, and voting, thoroughly understanding your ballot is a great way to enact meaningful change. I know it's not running related, and I know it makes people uncomfortable, but it matters. In good conscience, you can't tell people that doing things like we can't continue to consume at the rate we're consuming. We can't continue to tell ourselves that we can consume our way out of the environmental crisis. But there are we can do things like we got this. We can move forward in a positive way together. We can do it in a way that most people's values are attended to. And I am like when I freelance, I do a lot of work on environmental journalism, particularly. So I do a lot of reporting on rural issues here in Western Colorado. And people aren't divided. People are very in agreement on issues of public lands from across the political spectrum. And, I've been to rallies where there's someone in camo on my right and someone in tie-dye on my left, and both are speaking with equal passion to protect public lands because it's important for the cattle they ranch, or it's important for the trails they mountain bike. And there is so much common ground to be had. And coming back to that and realizing that the division is like kind of a put on in a lot of ways, and we can we do have these shared values. So a lot of times, like, I feel really optimistic when I write about these environmental issues, when I actually get to spend time with the cattle ranchers in Western Colorado who are working to protect water, when I spend time with the conservationists who've dedicated their career to trying to limit resource extraction on public lands.
Yeah, I mean, we're going outside of running for sure, and I really don't mind myself, but I think, and I can't vote here, unfortunately, so there's that. But having seen different places and how politics work, I feel that the US is a little tricky because just of the size and the diversity of issues that people will be facing. And sometimes the reality is that one group's not value, but just kind of interest will go against another group's interest. And that makes it particularly challenging when it's at such a large scale. I was in Switzerland also, which also will have some issue, but it's a much smaller scale. And they're able to have a more direct democracy where you can ask people very specific question and vote for that, as opposed to here where I mean, it's a little bit more binary sometimes.
Yes.
And,
yeah.
and it's kind of a package deal that sometimes can feel a little bit like an illusion of choice. How much choice do you really have? You don't even have a multiple choice of 5 different options. You have A or B, and A might align mostly with your values, but not on everything. So what do you do? And I think that makes it challenging when you're at the national level, but when you're at the more local level, then the issues are a little bit more specific and the questions are a little bit more specific, and you can have a bigger impact on local decision. But at the end of the day, the overarching federal government will have a lot of power, and that is difficult to change.
Yeah. Well, to bring it back to trail running, there's a piece of legislation that has sort of stalled out in Congress called the Colorado Outdoor Recreation Act that would sort of protect a big suite of public lands here in Colorado and do so in a way that prioritizes rural economies and jobs. And the Hard Rock course is like literally in this legislation. It's going to grandfather in the Hard Rock course so that we can continue to run, like, the permitting for Hard Rock will be preserved forever, protected forever. Like, it does not take like too much, like mental gymnastics to demonstrate how so many of these policies do benefit trail runners. Like, I would love for those places to be protected and to do so in a way that still encourages and engages with outdoor recreation. Like, that's amazing. I would love to see the Hard Rock course like codified in legislation. That's incredible.
I'm glad to hear that I can continue applying for the lottery
Exactly.
in the future. I don't know about running it, but I can apply for lottery. That's good enough for me.
Yeah.
Zoe, I appreciate your sunshine approach to it all. You bring a very enthusiastic spirit to it, and sometimes I feel like for myself, I have kids in Western Colorado. I have a family, kids in the school system, the whole thing, and sometimes when I think of these issues, it's almost overwhelming and like almost like overpowering and overwhelming. But I appreciate your sunshine spirit around it all, and in the ideas that we can change things, because sometimes it is overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, doing it for the kids. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, you guys. This was really fun. I know we went out there. Thanks for buckling up and staying with me. I'm excited to share some.
We got to use it in our. We said "Buckle Up," which is the name of the podcast.
That's why they pay me the big bucks. I'm excited to see you guys at Leadville and hopefully get to share some smiles and miles together.
Sure.
As well, thanks so much, Zoe, for your time. We appreciate all you do. I'm going to actually download this book. I'll have a little bit of time on my hands as I'll be camping off grid. I'm going to download this book if I can get it in audiobook, maybe? Not
Yeah,
yet.
yeah. Read by my co-author who has a delightful British accent. It's a great listen.
Oh, perfect. It's perfect. It's perfect. I'm a big audiobook person. I can't, I'll fall asleep if I actually read a book. So,
Yeah.
so I appreciate that. I'm actually going to grab that because I do have a bunch of credits right now in
Heck yeah.
my audiobook
Available
thingy.
wherever you get books.
Where else can we find you, Zoe? I know, actually, I mean, most of the people can find you anywhere if you just Google Zoe Rom. But where else can we find you?
I'm on Instagram as at carrot_flowers_Z. I have a podcast called Your Diet Sucks, where me and my co-host break down diet culture and endurance sports. You can read my writing and listen to my podcast at ultrasignup.com.
That podcast sounds awesome.
It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah. Have you put out an episode yet? I know it's really new.
We have a new one coming out tomorrow.
Okay, and that's the second one?
Third.
Oh, okay, third episode. Excellent. So I'll have to get onto that one too.
Yeah.
Because my diet does suck. But you probably know that already. Well, thanks again, Zoe. We'll see you out on the trail, if not sooner.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
Sounds good. Bye.
I'm Simon, and that's Brian.
We'd be thrilled to connect with you beyond our show.
For all of your endurance coaching requirement, you can reach out to Coach Brian at altitudeendurancecoaching.com.
To explore more of Simon's content, visit Running with Simon on YouTube.
Don't forget to rate, like, and share our content regularly.
Your support means a lot to us. Thanks.